Hey, Booktube Science Fiction Reads here with another episode of Recent Reads. So I'm still slowly getting back into reading. I had a lot of trial and error, trying some different things. I want to check out James P. Hogan sometime. And I'm thinking of giving Code of the Life Maker a look. Something I started once before and didn't continue with. Or maybe I was just reading the prologue, because there's a really cool prologue here that's kind of like a short story in its own. But I did not get around to checking him out yet. Instead, I went in a totally different direction. Decided to try short stories and ended up finally checking out Clark Ashton Smith. This is a recent reissue of his Zothique stories from Hippocampus Press, which I think over the last few years they've been putting out his work slowly. Yeah, this is from 2022, and I absolutely loved it. It's weird, horror and kind of sword and sorcery from the 20s and the 30s. These are specifically his Zothique setting. But Clark Ashton Smith is someone I've wanted to check out for years. Like 5 or so years ago, I randomly came across a documentary on him, and I watched it, and it was great. It was called, I think it was called Clark Ashton Smith, The Emperor of Dreams, and just really interesting. He was one of the big three in weird fiction with Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft, and knew the two of them, I think, through writing letters to one another. But he was like primarily like a poet, and I don't think he was all that fond of prose stories or even his own, but it served a purpose, an income, that is. So I think he's much more known for his poetry and was more fond of his poetry, but his horror stuff is so good. Zothique is like a far future Earth setting, the last continent. All the old continents have kind of sunk, and in their place is Zothique. And actually there is a map. Where is it? Which is handy. I mean, almost all the stories kind of explain where they are, where the characters are going from here to there, but it's not really that important. At no point do you actually have to refer to the map. But no, these were really cool, really disturbing. In Zothique, the last continent, there's a lot of necromancy and bored kings, bored aristocracy, evil wizards and stuff. A lot of black magic, a lot of raising of the dead. Standouts in this, the very first story, The Empire of the Necromancers, is really good. 2 necromancers coming over from the island of Nat, where necromancers are kind of groomed and then they're kind of released out into the world. Kind of go over to the main continent and just come across an old abandoned kind of empire in the sand dunes, really, and they just raise all the dead and kind of have their own empire. But most of the slaves they're using, dead slaves, are reanimated corpses of the former royal families, and a couple of these corpses kind of slowly gain sentience again, remember who they were, and kind of plot to take down these 2 necromancers, which is really cool. The Dark Eidolon was a good one, which I think Penguin Classics has an edition of his stories out, which is called The Dark Eidolon. Another good one. A lot of these stories involve evildoers setting out to accomplish something, and it usually backfires. Innocents die, the good guys die, the bad guys die. Pretty much everybody dies in a lot of his stories. It was really cool. There's lots of old gods and old demons and stuff being called up and referred to. So it's really cool, and he kind of fleshed out this future history kind of thing amongst these stories. I didn't expect to like him so much. You know, the only thing similar that I've read is C.L. Moore, but nowhere near the poetic purple prose, you know. C.L. Moore certainly could get close, but even his prose stories are like reading poetry. The words he uses he'll make the most disgusting, horrific scene beautiful to read, and it was really enjoyable. So I ordered his, also released by Hippocampus Press, his collection of like science fiction stories, which I'm sure are going to be mostly, they're going to be cosmic horror probably-ish, but not entirely. So after I read this, I'm eagerly awaiting for that other book, but I also had this kicking around, The Last Incantation from Timescape. This was out in '82. This is the first edition, and it's a bunch of his stories from different worlds, but there's no Zothique stories in here, so it's all new to me, and I'm about like a third through, and these stories go into other realms he's written about. He has some stories set in Atlantis, Hyperborea, which is the other big set of stories he wrote that I really want to read about the ancient past, kind of with like a giant ice sheet slowly claiming all the lands and humanity's kind of dying out. I want to read those, and there's a couple of them in here, one of which I've already read, which is pretty good. But so far I've read one science fiction story called Seedling of Mars. I just want to see when that was. That was published in 1939 in Wonder Stories Quarterly. Fall of 1939. And it involves a spacecraft from Mars landing in a football stadium. A bunch of scientists studying it walk onto it, and it lifts off. It takes them to Mars, where they meet this giant plant hybrid. It's like a plant-animal hybrid. This giant sentient plant pretty much encircles the entire planet with its vines, and basically tells them, hey, I'm a godlike intelligence, but my planet Mars is old and drying up, and I need your help. I've been observing your species. I will give you all sorts of knowledge if you help me acquire water from your planet, just to help me continue to survive. And most of the scientists are up for this, but there's a divide. Some think, you know, this creature is probably evil, which is what I figured the entire time, knowing what I've read so far. Any strange entity in a Clark Ashton Smith story is probably going to be nefarious. But it doesn't quite end out that way. So I'm looking forward to all his other stories. I know a bunch are set on Mars and possibly interconnected, and others in this collection I'm waiting for are just this is more science fiction-ish stories. So should be interesting. I'm enjoying him. Back into reading, seemingly slowly, but back into it. And I have a pile of paperbacks here, a small bunch that I've collected recently. A while ago, I got these two Michael Crichtons, Sphere and Eaters of the Dead. Two I already have, but I had them in this big hardcover omnibus, which I've now gotten rid of because I'd much rather have mass market paperbacks. Then I also have two from an author new to me, Eric Brown, who recently passed away, The Kings of Eternity and Engine Man. Eric Brown is someone who seems to be my kind of writer. I believe he wrote a lot of hard SF and space opera. Sounds like my kind of thing, so I've wanted to check him out for a while, and I finally came across a couple of his books, so I picked those up. In my last video, I had read 3 stories by James Gunn, and I mentioned I was eager to read his novel, The Listeners. So I have that now. I'm not sure when I'll read it, but I am happy to have it. It's the thing I'm most eager to read by him. And I believe it inspired Carl Sagan to write Contact, so should be interesting. It's along the same lines, you know, very SETI-ish, with an organization scanning the the stars for signals and making contact, kind of thing. Then I have a H.B. Piper, Empire. I now have quite the collection of his books, but I've read nothing by him. I just know a lot of his stuff takes place in a kind of a future history. I love future histories, so I look forward to reading his stuff eventually. Then I picked up a book it turned out I already had, but this one was a different edition and nicer condition. So this is John Wyndham's Stowaway to Mars, which was previously published under his pseudonym John Bainan. So I got a nice, what is this, cornet copy, which was in better condition than the copy I had. I think this was originally from 1935, but this copy is 1972. Ian MacDonald, Desolation Road. Yeah, this one has a wild synopsis. I'm not even going to try to explain. It just sounded interesting, and I don't believe I've read any Ian MacDonald. He's got some other stuff I'm more interested in reading, but I have to find it. I've got a story collection by Barry Malzberg out of Ganymede. Someone I need to check out. It's kind of had a resurgence in popularity lately on SF Booktube. Brian Ald's Star Swarm. One of his I'm not that familiar with. This is actually a pretty neat copy from Signet Books, 1964. I believe this is like a far future post-humanity story, or at least an early version of that type of thing, based on the synopsis. So it sounds quite interesting. Then T.J. Vass, who wrote God Whale, which is a book I recently bought, and then I passed on this, Half Past Human, not realizing at the time that it's connected in that future. So kind of the sequel, or maybe it's the other way around. I can't remember at the moment, but yeah, I know you can read them separately, but they are somewhat connected, and now I have them both. And then to round that out, when I got that big batch of book club editions online in an auction, there was a couple paperbacks. I only kept one, and it's Charles Blatt's Garbage World, which is this tiny, who published this? Belmont Tower, that's why I didn't recognize it. A Belmont Tower book. Chronicling the differences between two vastly different cultures. One that's high society and one that's literally people living amongst trash. And these two societies coming into contact with one another. Sounds interesting. I haven't read anything else by Charles Blatt. So that's where I'm at. I am shortly going on a 3 or 4 day vacation, and we are going to be stopping in at my favorite bookstore, Barely Used Books, in Parry Sound, Ontario. So I'm sure I'll have an excellent book haul after there, as I have a couple times over the years. So I'm looking forward to that. And until then, I'm going to continue reading some Clark Ashton Smith, and then hopefully get back into some good old classic science fiction after that. I just need the mood to strike me. For now, I'm enjoying just short stories, a couple a day. And yeah, we'll see where we go from there. So as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.